We have Mario Cimoli, who will speak about the importance of technological capabilities to achieve structural transformation, and that structural transformation is absolutely critical. He is the director of the Division of Productivity and Management at the UN Economic Commission on Latin America and the Caribbean in Santiago, and he is also a professor of economics at the University of Venice. He has published prolifically. I will only name one book he has edited together with Giovanni Dossi and Joe Stiglitz, The Political Economy of Capabilities Accumulation, The Past and Future of Policies for Industrial Development, 2009, Oxford.
After the presentation, I want to give you where we are, which is our view, which is the view of, this is a clear representation that is in a structuralist presentation. You know, and for the young student, you know that structuralist is, of course, is an idea on economics that was developed in the 50s. But there is one place around the world where this idea was strongly supported. And that place around the world is ECLA, Economic Commission for Latin America. And we are very happy in this commission that in Harvard, people speak about industrial transformation. In Berkeley, people speak about industrial policy. The World Bank recently was organizing a seminar on industrial policy. Really, ECLAC is very happy on that. And because we stayed in the bottom of the world, there, and when we have speak for 20 years about industrial policy, they said, look, ECLAC, that is the bad people. That is the people that don't understand what industrialization and development is. And really, we are very happy. But for the beginning of presentation, and I want to give you what structuralist for us is, more or less. And we're moving about, you know, if there is here a student on economics, they know clearly what thinking about when I put orthodox, moderate mainstream, and evolutionary structuralist approaches. More or less, we are moving on this column. And there is elements that you have heard yesterday, but there is something element that you have heard yesterday, and it's important to put on the table. And I want to stop only on one part. If you turn the more orthodox mainstream and you take industrial policy, you have to think that for 15 years, 20 years, the sentence was the best industrial policy being none at all. Non-industrial policy. And we have to understand that we have new times, new period. This is really important. What is evolutionary structuralism? It's only for developing countries? We believe no. This is also for developed countries too. It's not something that you resolve all of the problem of development, and when you arrive, you have resolved it of that. You arrive and you have no market economy, more, you know, orthodox approach and so on. We think that structuralist and evolutionary approach is valid for different stage of development of country. That is an enormous difference. It's not only a path through to arrive and to solve the problem of development. What does the most important element is at the level of micro, a development of industrial structure, structural change, industrial policy, the role of macro prices, exchange rate, interest rate, and the relation between macro and industrial policy. And we are going to go through this presentation around this part, and I think there is learning accumulation of capability is very important, as opposed to the idea that only rationality is the behavior of the economic agent. Sectoral firms are important, firms are different, sectors are different in producing technology, in developing technology, in creating externality, and so on. And clearly for us, that's very important, probably for the more younger student, productivity, because if the productivity doesn't increase, you can to have resources and surplus to be distributed. Unemployment are both crucial variables. Also for the variable that you have seen in the panel before. And we think that macro prices are important for industrial policy, and the combination of industrial policy and macro prices is a very important aspect to have in our mind. At the end of the history, we believe more in the Keynesian Schumpeterian war, that the orthodox and mainstream You know that there is now in vogue the consolidated adjustment, fiscal adjustment for development in Europe and so on. And we think that if there is some kind of global cooperation, it's going to be if we think together in the Keynesian and Schumpeterian world. Now, the presentation. I think these are the most important aspects of the structuralist approach. The first one is the microeconomics, technological capability, at the level of sector and firms, production strategy and diversification, macro prices, real exchange rate, and structural change. And there is an important aspect that we want to give an attention, that is the importance of deglobalization and shock on developing economies, and the end, some kind of rules that have for us to regulate the relationship between developing, the industrializing and industrialized economies. At the beginning, I don't stop in each of them. I will tell you, if you are a student of economy, these are different aspects or hypotheses that you have. If you are an engineer or biologist, for you these seems to be very normal things. Technology requires normal time, real time. Technology has path dependencies, which you have learned yesterday is important what I have to learn tomorrow and after tomorrow. There is a complementarity between technology and sector. There is no substitutability of that. If you put an economist and to show that exists an isoquant, that is continuous, and you have the choices between capital and labor, and you explain that to an engineer, the engineer said, but you are crazy. There is a complementarity. You can have this continuous divisibility between capital and a human being. And there is a reversibility. When you create a technology, when you learn a lot, when you find, there is difficult to go back, and there is a completely different aspect what you have, orthodox aspect. They think that if relative prices change the combination of factors, in the logic time, not in the real one. And there is one of the most important aspects that I have to stop. And I think probably many of you are students that have studied political science. And probably some professors have speak about you about Karl Polanyi. And when you read Karl Polanyi has one important point that says that knowledge is tacit. And many of you that came from different parts of the world, you know really what tacit means. When you want to eat the food of your country here, you say, but it's not the same. But they have the recipe, but they not produce the same food. If you want to eat a pizza here, it's difficult. If you had the perfect recipe, the formal information about pizza is difficult to produce the same pizza that in Napoli. And of course, you have that information, but there is what in anthropological economics we call tacitness. And this is an important variable. And what the people, when you study a theorem, and you have passed the examination with a more high evaluation, and you can understand the theorem, but the professor asks about the theorem, you write, put the demonstration, and pass 2 or 3 years, you have studied a lot, you say, and now I understand what this theorem means. And this is not writing in that way. What really the theory means, this is tacit knowledge. When you produce, when you study in the firms, when you create the production, tacit knowledge is a crucial variable. It's not information. If you have traditional economics, it's only about information, asymmetry about information. For the micro foundation of structuralists, tacit knowledge, irreversibility, path dependency are the crucial variables. A structural change. Yesterday there was a presentation about that. That is an issue that is very important. And why structural change is important? This is the result for development. Because if employment, people that have to be employment, go to be employed in the sector with higher productivity, sector that diffuse technology, sector that create externality, and the economy is absorbing unemployment, and absorbing underemployment people too. This is an economy that's creating an engine of growth because it's increasing productivity on one side, but it's increasing employment on the other side. And this is what structurally mean about. Because if we don't have increase in productivity, I don't have resources for the environmental issues. If the people is not employed in the economy, I have an enormous problem to put the priority about what people have to be employed with a bad consumer of energy and so on, about why do people have to be employed to produce and to have a just job. Now, structural change is important, and really it's one of the most important aspects to explain development. And I want to show one picture only. And you take here on the x-axis, this is productivity, labor productivity. If you take on the y-axis, you have the sectoral composition. Take Korea and Latin America between 19 and 2006. And look, in the 19, the productivity of all regions was quite similar. Look what's happened after more than 16 years. The productivity of Korea has increased a lot compared with Latin America, but what is behind this process? Look the composition of sector. They have incorporated in the industry those sectors that created technology, diffuse knowledge, diffuse productivity, and so on. What is the important aspect? This increasing in productivity is really related to the change of the structure. There is sector that can diffuse technology more quickly than other sectors. There is sector that is structurally important to create this type of development, increasing in productivity. However, it's not enough, because I can increase the productivity of one economy, but the people remain unemployed. I have to increase productivity to create a structural change and absorb people that is underemployment. That is the crucial aspect of development. And employment, large shares of the labor force is in low productivity sector. And we need to create employment in the high productivity sector, and the engine of labor is this structural transformation and the weight of this sector in the economy. I want to put only two elements, two cases. Argentina. Why Argentina? Because Argentina was the country that I can say suffered strongly more the recommendation of international association for during 20 years. And we have three variables: the composition of sector, air is real exchange rate, added value, employment, and productivity. Look, when there is an enormous devaluation between 2001, and 2008, there is a pass-through on enormous devaluation. There was a large increase on employment. But however, on the other side, the productivity has not increased so much. But employment, yes, has increased a lot. Take the case of Brazilian one. It's more or less the same. You have an enormous increase of employment, but the productivity in the last period have decreased too. What's happened in this country? There is new policy that increase and absorb employment, but the technical change diffused in the economy is very poor. There is no strong structural change. There is no change in productivity that absorb employment in very high status of the productivity. If you take the comparison of Korea, look Korea in the last I think, 30 years. Employment has increased a lot, has increased a little bit in the last 2 decades, but this is only because I arrived to the full employment situation. But look productivity. Look, productivity is missing. The increase in productivity was so huge, so important, and was so stable. Now, absorbing employment with increasing of productivity. This is a leitmotif of a structural change and the importance of the structural change. Look at Korea. If you put on the y-axis productivity and added value on the x-axis, you can see a very, you said a very stable model. However, this can be produced with industrial policy. That is a very important thing. But it's necessary to have an industrial policy only. Take the case of Latin America. For the last 20 years, there was an industrial policy. Chile has abandoned industrial policy. Argentina has abandoned industrial policy. Brazil has remained the only country with a development bank. And the other economy has abandoned a lot industrial policy. But they have a macro policy that is only worry about the nominal stability. And there is no worry about the exchange rate or real exchange rate. Real exchange rate is another important component to create capability. It's not industrial policy alone, but I need real exchange rate. You can have an enormous case as the Brazil today. You have an enormous, important development bank, supporting technology and firms and so on. But on the other side, you have an enormous appreciation of the real exchange rate. Both are compensated at the last of the moment. If both are compensated at the last, you don't have an effect of industrial policy, and the structural change is going to be soft, and we don't have changes in productivity. Now, what is another important consideration of structural change, a structuralist approach, is macro policy has to be combined in some way with industrial policy. Macro policy has to give the space for industrial policy to be active. And recently, was yesterday or 2 days ago, the Post published a recent paper of International Monetary Fund where they accept clearly that we have to intervene on exchange rate, another structural achievement. But what is important is that you have in your mind that both sides of the coin are very important to have maintained. On Latin America, the regime have changed. The macro policy have changed. The industrial policy was very poor. They have suffered enormous shock. What's happened with the productivity at the end of history? The trend of productivity remains stable or decreasing. That is a very important thing because you don't absorb an employment, a very high productivity sector, but your productivity has decreased in the long term. This is a crucial aspect. Why, and I want to say to clear to the student, and the Rio plus 20, the issue is going to be development more than environmental changes. Why? Because the Brazilian government is very worried about the capability to create employment and productivity. And they are really very worried that the pattern that they have in this moment going to be too broken down. And this is a crucial point that you have to have in your mind. Now, if you think about the structuralist approach, productivity and employment are the both variables that we have in your mind. This part is about one other important principle that the people, it has to do with the globalization. It's what a structuralist approach called implicit reciprocity and its corollary. What does that mean? You know, take the case of Latin America, Brazil, Argentina. They have enormous expansionary policies to the domestic market, okay? They are expanding public expenditure. The demand is growing. They are creating new jobs and new employment and so on. The productivity is very low. They need a structural change, apply industrial policy, but on the same time, they don't have absorbed it. They export to the developed economy. Why? Because take the case of Europe. Europe has an recession, introducing very adjustment and fiscal policies. There is not market. At the same time, you have an enormous quantity of dollar in the market, and most of the real exchange rate in this economy has to be reevaluated. What's happened? That they don't find the market where they export. In this case, what structuralist approaches worry about that is that if this process is going to be to continue in this way, they are going to fight the balance of constraint. Trade balance is going to be operated. And they had to devaluate it a lot. There is a worry about inflation and so on. This is a global process. Latin America, developing countries need to produce a structural change, increase employment and productivity. They absorb export for developed countries, but at the same time, they need to put their export in developed countries too. If you have an asymmetry on macro policies, one has an expansionary policy, another one has a very restrictive one, there is no compatibility. And what's happened? And this came yesterday. We have prepared the paper, but this is a declaration of Dilma Rousseff yesterday in La Hoja de San Paulo. And what she said? No, this is not the situation that we like. Our pattern, we are very worried because there is a tsunami of dollars. There is a quantity of dollars that the real is extra revaluated. Second one, what Dilma said. Dilma said recently yesterday, if this continues going to be like that, we are going to introduce tariff to trade. And we are going to stop quantity imports. And this is happening around the world because there is not coordination in the global processes. And these both sides of the same coin need to be coordinated. This was clearly the point. The regime in Brazil can be sustained with a value of 1.5 real per dollar. It's not sustainable at all. They have to close the economy. They don't find the markets in Europe or state to export their products that stimulated a structural change in the economy. And it's what we call the corollary of implicit reciprocity. And this requires a government of the global economy, but not only on the financial side too, on the real side too. It is important to have that we have an enormous imbalance on the real side. We can sustain a structural change, increase in employment and productivity in the industrializing economy if there is a macro policy that there is enormous asymmetry between one side and the other. If there is one side that has expansionary policy, another side that has restrict policy, the model is going to be broken. Countries are going to decide to stop imports and to create barriers to trade. there is quite an impossible. We think about, you want to put about, to have an agreement about the environmental issue, that is fine, but you have to think that it's an important issue to debate today, because most of the other arguments that you have presented before are going not to be solved if this structural condition are going to put on the table. Conclusion. What the structuralist approach put about? Said, think about when you study what is development in every country, not only the industrializing one, learning, capabilities, accumulation of capabilities, tacit knowledge are the crucial variables. And there is a lot of work on this issue. There is a lot of work studying industry by industry, sector by sector, in different type of countries. Probably this kind of literature doesn't arrive here, but there is a lot of things to do that. That is not only about industry and so on, it's about institutions too, that's an important thing. And there is another point. We think that it's crucial. It's crucial, I want to be that other international organizations put, not all of them, but some of them put industrial policy in their vocabulary again. We are very happy with that. But only with industrial policy, without any support or space in macro policy, there is no reason the impact is going to be avoided, and the result of industrial policy is going to be very poor, and we are going back to the old situation. If we want to discuss this issue between industrializing economy and industrialized one, there is necessary to have a dialogue about the real balance and the macro coordination of macro policy, some kind of macro coordination. What is the way to do that? If you think at two sides of the coin, where there is, we call Keynesian plus Schumpeterian approach, it could be the way to think and to come out of the recession. Now, and concluding that, a structuralist is coming again, has a new way to think about development. But think about it's not development. I think if you think about what's happened recently in Europe, about they forget, I conclude, I meet people from OECD in Paris, the people said, we are very worried problem because we are introducing a lot of liberalization, but we forget how industrial policy have to be rethinking again. And they forget what is industrial policy about, creating job, productivity, and so on. Structural is not only one aspect for industrializing economy. I think it's an important aspect for the world economy. To have a perspective in terms of Keynesian, Schumpeterian approach is an important approach to have in our mind, because it's an approach where we can have a coordination in the global world between the two sides of the world. And this is a difficult task. We have the G20 in Mexico recently, 1 week ago, and it was quite a failure. It was quite a failure because the reason, because countries like India, China, Argentina, Brazil put this issue on the table. Now we need a coordination, because if we don't have coordination about the real issue, we have affecting most of two important variables in industrializing countries that are productivity and employment. Thanks very much.